Well, good morning, family. Here we are again. I on my drive up, I listen to worship music. I listen to it a lot, whether it's old school hymns or bluegrass, country, Christian music, sometimes Christian death metal. It's out there, trust me. If I'm doing the vacuuming, it's like, get through this, But and I have a rotation of songs that I like to listen to. And this one song by Toby Mac came up today, and it was the chorus in it just really hit me. I mean, I've heard this song 100 times, and it just today it was like, boom, ministering to me. It says, I could use a little church right now. Love to have a little family around. I've been feeling so overwhelmed. I could use a little church right now. I know I'm not the only one feeling that right now. There's a lot of us. Matter of fact, it's like, all right, Jesus, everything seems to be in place. When are you coming back? I'm ready. Nope. He's going, nope, there's that one person. I still need to get them. Once I get that one person, though, it's on. But that one just hit me, And that's what we do here. This is your family, right? I mean, you don't know all of them yet, but hopefully you will. It's nice that we have one service again, keep everybody kind of consolidated. I know there's people traveling. We're leaving tomorrow for our vacation to go to Wyoming for the week. Appreciate your prayers. Talk about stress. And I knew a couple weeks ago I was preaching today. And I thought, good, I got plenty of time to prepare. Nope, another last minute cram session. It's like every time I would sit down to get going. Oh, the dogs need to go outside. Okay, go on that side, And it's and the neighbor comes over. Hey, and start talking. And next thing you know, it's time to make dinner. And it's like, jeez. But yeah, brisket. Oh my goodness, you guys, one trick pony. Come on. I do other things than brisket. All right. Well, let's see what we can do. But it's just good to have some rest, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Jesus and rest. He's the Lord of the Sabbath. Life does get kind of crazy and chaotic, and it's like you almost don't have enough time to sit down and rest. And God had set up a time of rest for us. Actually, when he created the earth, it said he rested on the seventh day, and he made that the Sabbath for man. He was giving us a precursor to who he was. He is our rest. And, I think last time I was up here, I was griping about getting older, not, waking up one day and realizing I'm the same age as old people. When did that happen? And how the algorithm likes to give me suggestions for my shirts and stuff, my t-shirts. Well, I ordered it, and it finally came in yesterday. It only took them 2 weeks, so I guess I'm not the only one feeling old. But it says, I never dreamed that one day I would become a grumpy old man, but here I am killing it. So there it is. It made it. Oh, yeah. God's got a sense of humor, I'll tell you. Let's see here. So we're gonna talk about rest, the Sabbath. But what I want us to do real quick, and this one really ministers to me, is Acts 17:11. I'll turn over there real quick and just read it to you. Now, these Jews, or the Bereans, were more noble than those in Thessalonica. They received the word with all eagerness and examined the scriptures daily to see if these things were true. What that's telling us is when you're hearing the word, you need to be in the word too. Make sure that we're not saying something that is leaven in the word, because a little leaven will mess up the whole thing, right? So Here's God challenging us. Make sure that you're not just listening to me, Sam, Patrick, anybody in particular. You need to be in the Word also. You got to keep us accountable. Because there might be something that we say. Now, sometimes you misspeak. That just happens. That's part of life. But if it's something completely against what the Scripture actually says, then they need to be called on that. And so that has kind of been my working verse for quite a few years now, as I study and as I listen to other preachers and so forth. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the Sabbath. And Jesus is going to tell everybody that he is the Lord of the Sabbath. So Sabbath comes from the root Sabbat, which is rest. And he is our rest. What does he say? He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. I will give you Sabbath." He came to fulfill the law and teach that the law cannot make us holy. The Sabbath is not a particular day, like Saturday at that time. A location, the Holy Land. In Colossians 2:16 and 17, it tells us that rest cannot be found in anything but Jesus Christ. Now, we're going to see Jesus dealing with the teachers of the law at that time. And what they had actually done was taken God's law and they had added a little bit to it. They put little things in here and there, which is like the Bereans. You know, if people were able to actually have a Bible back then and they could read for themselves, they would know. But all too often, a lot of people go to church and just listen, and they don't read, and so they don't know. They're going to take the pastor or the priest's name or word for it, and they really don't know what's happening. There's far too many churches like that. I hope we're never like that. I hope we're all in the Word. I think there's a perfect analogy to today that the Pharisees are kind of like a government agency, like the ATF. I don't know if you've heard, but they would take a law, because Congress is the only ones that can make law. Only Congress, right? Not the bureaucracy. They make a law, and then a bunch of bureaucrats, at, say the ATF, for example, will read into that law and add other laws on top of that and start enforcing those laws. Well, if you've been paying attention the last couple of weeks, a lot of federal judges have been smacking down the ATF a lot lately. I mean, just saying there is nothing in there that the Congress has said. You guys are making this stuff up, and you will not do that. Yes, amen. And Trump, to his credit, he has told them to stand down and don't fight these, because I know there's plenty of people in that bureaucracy that would love to fight it and, you know, appeal these rulings, but they haven't. So we'll see what happens, but eventually everything ends up in the Supreme Court anyway. But so that's kind of where your Pharisees were at. They were adding things onto the Scripture that really were not there. And so we're going to pick it up at chapter 12. We'll do verses 1 and 2. Matthew 12, verses 1 and 2. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." There's another interesting part to this. The grain fields and all that were like out in the country, right? You're not going to have grain fields in the city. It just doesn't happen. Well, the Pharisees were not allowed to travel more than a half a mile away from their homes. Little busybodies a little bit, So they're actually breaking the Sabbath too. Interesting. But in Deuteronomy 23, verses 24 and 25, that made provision. If you're going through a pathway, and all the farmers knew this, if you're going through a pathway, you've got stuff along there. People were allowed to grab a little bit to eat on their journey. And a lot of them did it on purpose, where they would just leave that stuff along the pathway. Ruth is a perfect example, the book of Ruth, on gleaning. What they would do is you would go through your fields, you'd have your harvesters going, and anything that was left behind, if there's anything dropped, the people that needed food in your village were able to go through and glean, grab stuff that they could take for themselves. Ruth paints a great picture of this. And so that's what was going on here. Basically, and it also says you cannot take more than what you're eating. So you couldn't just grab some stuff and put it in your bag and take it for the rest of the journey. Well, they said plucking that grain, that's work. That's work. The irony here is the priests, the Pharisees, were commanded by God's law to do sacrifice on the Sabbath. Is that not work? It is work, isn't it? Matter of fact, that's what they would do. They would have to do, it goes through a whole litany of what they're supposed to do and how they're supposed to kill a couple of animals and then mix these things to make the grain offering and all this. So they're actually doing work, and they actually worked harder on the Sabbath than the rest of the people did. So these guys are the ones that are going around and they're picking on Jesus and his disciples, trying to find anything they could, to disqualify him. They're basically challenging God. That God doesn't know what he said in his word. Let me know how that works out for you. Okay, so, and then in verse, we'll go to 3 and 4. And he said to them, "Have you not heard what David did when he was hungry? And those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat or those who were with him, but only for the priests." And he's referring to, when David was running from Saul. And David was God's chosen king. He was the one that God wanted. Man wanted Saul, because Saul was very tall. He was a tall guy. Saul was tall. David wasn't. Saul was tall. Sounds like a lyric to a song. Anyway, so Saul, it says he towered above most people, and everyone goes, "Oh, that's the guy. He's a big guy. He must be God's chosen one." Nope. God looks at the heart. Well, Saul was trying to kill David. And so David was in exile, and he's running around, and he walks into the synagogue and asks for something to eat. And the priest actually gave him bread, which was against the law, God's law. And yet he still did it, and he still ate it, and those with him. So he's showing them. I love it. It's almost like Jesus' attitude is like, "Bro, don't you know the scriptures?" Yeah. Right? It's like, you guys are supposed to be the keepers of the scriptures. Don't you know what the scriptures say? Again, he's talking circles around them, but they're not getting it. So he's setting him up as king because they respected David as their king. They actually called him the son of David because from David's lineage we were going to get the Messiah. And again, Jesus, like I said, the priests broke the Sabbath law in doing all the sacrifices, the works that they did. And Jesus was more than able to break a man's law because it wasn't God's law. So they had tacked on this part where you can't even pick the grains because that's work. So that's what that is. In verses 5 5 and 6, he's going to set himself up as priest. So basically, he's given them this threefold trinity of who he is. He's explaining to them, but they're just not getting it. So in 5 and 6, let me see where I go here. Okay. Or have you not read the law, how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? That's what I was just talking about. They're actually supposed to work on the Sabbath, and yet they can remain guiltless. So he's setting himself up as the chief priest. I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. Now this was getting them, because there was nothing greater than the temple. That's where God's presence was, in the Ark of the Covenant. And he's equating himself, not even equating himself, he's saying, I'm greater than the temple. Boy, this got them really going. But he is the chief priest. If he'd wanted to and prove it to him, he could have walked right into the temple and gone into the Holy of Holies and been fine. But he didn't do that. All this stuff was just to show who he was, to see if they would get it. And they didn't. In verses 7 and 8, are they up there, by the way? Oh, perfect. Good job. And if you know what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. Now he's really rocking the boat. He's setting himself up as the chief prophet, or the head prophet. He was quoting Hosea 6:6, which he also quoted in chapter 9, verse 13. God wants mercy, not religious sacrifice. Love, not legalism. Relationship over ritualism. How many churches can you think of where everything's just legalistic, ritualistic, traditionalistic? That's not what he wants. There's no rest in that. You can't keep up with everything. He wants us to rest in him, put our trust in him. Sit at his feet and listen. How many times do we do that? God gave you one mouth and two ears. It's not hard to do the math. Listen twice as much as you talk. I'm guilty. And sometimes we just need to sit at God's feet and listen to what he has to say. We're so busy telling them, la, 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 Lord, 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 Lord. Lord, what about this? What about this? He's like, can't you just rest for a second? Maybe I have something to tell you. I don't know. Somebody needed that encouragement. I know I did. So he's asking the Pharisees again, have you guys not read the word? Do you even know what the word says? And this is what I love about this passage here. He's basically telling them, I am the King of Kings, verses 3 and 4. I am the high priest, verses 5 and 6. And I am the prophet of God, 7 and 8. I am the anointed one. I am the Messiah. Amen. But they weren't getting it. All the law and the prophets, or as we talked about a year ago, I don't know. The law and the prophets was the Old Testament, what we call the Old Testament. He says that's all about me. When you read the Old Testament, I want to challenge you. Look for Jesus in there, because it's going to be about him. Every book that's in the Old Testament, when the scriptures were canonized into the Bible, referenced Jesus, or Jesus referenced. He is the law and the prophets. But they didn't want to see it because they had their blinders on. They were the legal scholars. They were the keepers of the law. They knew everything. And then when they're challenged by God himself, they fall short. But they like to put those rules and regulations on everybody else and keep us all, Keep our head on a swivel. What's going on? What if I screw up now? What have I done now to earn God's condemnation? So he's basically telling him, as the chief priest, I'm greater than temple. As the prophet, I'm greater than Jonah. And Jonah was one of their revered prophets. And as the king, I am greater than Solomon, who was the most beautiful, most splendid king that they'd ever had. These were all three things that they looked up to and emulated. In calling himself the Lord of the Sabbath, he equated himself with God because it was God that established the Sabbath. Genesis 2, 1 and 3. Now we're going to talk about the withered hand man, the handicapped man. This is verses 9 through 14. He went on from there and entered their synagogue. Notice how he called it their synagogue. Not his synagogue, not God's synagogue. It was their synagogue. This was something of their doing. This was no longer in fellowship with how God had intended it. And a man was there with a withered hand, and they asked him, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath?" So that they might accuse him. He said to them, "Which one of you who has a sheep, if it falls into a pit on the Sabbath, will not take hold of it and lift it out?" Common sense, right? How much more valuable is a man than a sheep? Last time I preached it was birds. Now it's sheep, so we're moving up here. So it is, I've highlighted that part here. So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. The religious leaders had a crippled man, and they used him as a weapon to try and go after Jesus. But Jesus honors the man's faith and trust in healing him. Notice how he said, "Take your hand out." He didn't go, "Well, Lord, it's crippled. I can't do anything with it." But he listened, and it was restored just like the other one, because the man's faith. And this gets better. But instead of rejoicing at this miracle that they just saw, what did they do? Yep, and he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand," and it was restored, and the man's hand was restored. But the Pharisees went out and conspired against him how to destroy him or how to kill him. They were in his presence when he did this miracle. And they were so filled with jealousy. Jealousy is very dangerous. As a matter of fact, I think there's one of the 10 Commandments about that, for a reason. Their jealousy blinded them to the miracle that they just experienced. And what do? They conspired to kill him, to get rid of him. He's taking away from our tithing. They're not bringing us the money anymore. We got to get rid of this guy. Or, people are not coming to our synagogues. What is it? Oh, it's this guy. We got to get rid of him. We need to fill up our seats again. Silliness. Not doing good on the Sabbath or any other day, for that matter, is evil. Plain and simple. Not doing good when you know good needs to be done and not doing it, that's evil. So, always look for that opportunity. Always try to help somebody out. Like I said, we're all in this together. A lot of us are stressed. A lot of us are overwhelmed. It was crazy getting ready this week for a sermon. Like I said, I just couldn't get enough time. And then also planning our vacation that we're taking off tomorrow, and picking up the motorhome. Nothing ever goes on time. My wife had to fly out for a couple of days and back. All the flights were delayed. I had a 1 o'clock appointment to pick up the RV. I think we finally got seated about 2 o'clock because, one guy working the whole place. Genius. I don't know who that genius was, but, it's like, my goodness, Lord, I can't get enough time, And he's just saying, I got you. I got this. Don't worry about what you'll say on that day. I will give you the words. And like I said, last night cram session, late night, last night, cram session, and here we are. But I always pray, God, not me, you. The whole time I was up here, coming up here, I'm driving, please, Lord, speak through me, because I don't want him to hear me. I want him to hear you. And then that song came on. And I was like, okay, we got this, Lord, you and me. Verses 15 and 16. Jesus, aware of this, we withdrew from there, and I love this part, and many followed him, and he healed them all. These were the people that were there that saw the exact same thing, and they believed, and they were healed. And ordered them not to make him known. That's kind of interesting. And ordered them not to make him known. It's like, I would think you want everybody to blab that out and, make sure everybody hears about this, right? No. It was, actually, he was referring to, in this next passage here too, verses 17 through 21 we're going to talk about. But he's referencing Isaiah and just that he was humble. He was not trying to draw attention to himself. Matter of fact, the Bible tells us that when we do see him, we will be amazed because we always put Jesus, this good-looking guy, that, just would draw everybody to him. Because we judge based on looks. It's just a fact of life. But the Bible actually says we will look at him in amazement and go, there's nothing special about this guy. And as a matter of fact, it says he's going to carry the scars that we should have had for all eternity as a reminder of what he did for us. Now, Satan, on the other hand, he's very good looking. Think about the best looking actor you can think of. I don't know, is Brad Pitt still around? Is he good looking? I don't know. Whatever you think, ladies. Guys, we don't think of that stuff. But we're going to see him and go, wow, this is the one that caused all this trouble? Because the Bible says he is the most beautiful of all God's creation. He does not have horns and a pitchfork and a long tail with a point on the end of it. He is actually extremely beautiful, and it will blow us away when we see him being bound up and put in chains and eventually thrown into the lake of fire. Let's see here. So, Matthew is going to take some liberties with this passage here of 17 through 19, and actually all the way through to 21. But he's referring to Isaiah 42, 1 through 4. So you can write that down and look later. But let's read that. This was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. Behold, my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved in whom my soul is well pleased. I will put my spirit upon him, and he will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. He will not quarrel or cry aloud, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. So he's talking about, he's not going to be a showboater. He's not going to be like, you be healed, and screaming and yelling and doing all that kind of stuff. Or, look at me, look at me, look at me. A perfect example of this happened in Jesus' presence. He was in the synagogue one day, and there was a woman with, let's just say, 2 pennies. Okay, 2 mites, but they're basically 2 pennies. And they're taking the offering, and she puts those into the offering. And then there's the priest who had this check. I picture it like one of those, those big ones that they give you at Publishers Clearinghouse, because he wanted to make sure everybody saw the amount that was on there. I am giving these $10,000, and he's trying to cram it into the thing, but it's too big, and so, oh well, here's the check, right? He's doing it to showboat. And what does Jesus tell him? You gave out of your abundance. It didn't hurt you. She gave everything she could. That hurt her. She feels that. And what did he tell him? You received your reward here on earth. You got your reward. You showed off. People saw you. They were amazed, maybe. Who knows? Some people were in awe. You got your reward. She will get more reward in heaven. These are the people he's dealing with. And then so notice that he does call it Gentiles, though. He will proclaim justice to the Gentiles. Now, last time I preached, I was talking about how Jesus sent out his disciples, told them not to go to the Gentiles, right? Do not go to the Gentiles, because if you go to the Gentiles, you become unclean. And if you try to take the word to the Jews, they won't listen to you. So he sent them to the Jews first. And Matthew's giving us a vision or some insight into what's going to happen here. The Jews rejected him. The Gentiles were going to take it. He wasn't writing this the whole time along. This is all coming back to him as he's writing all this stuff down after Jesus is ascended into heaven. But he saw what was going on. The Jews were going to reject him. And it was the Gentiles, those of us, that were going to accept him. And in the passage in Isaiah, it says the nations. Isaiah was already saying it back then, hundreds of years before this. It was going to be the nations. It wasn't going to be the Jews. And in the second part, where he says Gentiles, verses 20 and 21, a bruised reed will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not quench, until he brings justice to victory, and in his name the Gentiles will hope. Again, he says Gentiles, and in that, Isaiah actually says the world will hope. So we're seeing the religious leaders are fighting against Jesus. They're trying to destroy him, and all he's trying to do is bring them rest. I'm just trying to bring you guys rest. Now, when you become a Christian, does that mean your life's going to get honky-donkey? Nope. No. But at the end of the race, you're going to have rest. Matter of fact, there's another word for rest in the Hebrew. It's Noah. Like Noah on the ark. And if you take that genealogy from Adam means man, to Noah, go through all those names, Methuselah, the oldest man alive, his death shall bring. If you take all those names and you put them together, basically it boils down to man is appointed mortal sorrow, but the blessed Lord shall come down, teaching that his life shall bring the disparaged rest. Isn't that amazing? In the names from Adam to Noah. Because in Hebrew, your name means something. My name means something. Craig. Dweller at the crag. That sounds great. What's a crag? Then you look into a crag. Sounds kind of bad. It's actually a fortress. Dweller at the fortress at the base of the mountain. So I guess I'm what were those guys? Not hobbits, the dwarfs. They lived in the mountain. I'm a dwarf. Well, the doctor, when you're a kid and they do that x-ray on your hand, they go, oh yeah, you're going to be this tall when you get older. I was supposed to be 6'4". Not even with the hat up, am I 6'4". So I guess I'm a dwarf. It's okay. They were fearless. Fearless warriors. That's what we want to be. Fearless warriors for Jesus. I don't care. I don't care what anybody says about me. If they don't like my sharing the gospel, it's on you, not me. I'm just doing what I'm told. Right? Let's do that. Let's take those opportunities. And then finally, verses 20 and 21. Interesting choice of words here. Bruised reed will not break, nor a smoldering wick be quenched. Well, what were reeds used for? Even to this day, for musical instruments. Now, if it's bruised, you can't use that part. But notice what he says. Even though you're bruised, I'm not going to pluck you out and throw you away. I can still use you. Just like what is it? Oh, yeah, flax. Flax. I said flux. That's for soldering. Flax. Flax was only used for wicks. And it would keep, smoldering as long as you kept feeding it. It seems kind of like a pointless, thing, and yet it has a purpose. It keeps the eternal fire going. He will never quench that fire that he put inside of you. We can do that, but he won't do that. He's just looking for those of us that want to be used. So be used. Let God do what God does in you and through you.